Putorana, do you know where that is?
No, I don't.
Putorana,
I've never heard of it.
somewhere in Latin America.
It can only be the Yamol.
No, I don't. Bermuda Triangle, I guess. I don't know. I read somewhere, but I don't remember.
In the northwest of the middle Siberian plateau of hill is the highest part of it. This is the Putarana Plateau. Perhaps there is no land in Russia more amazing than this. Wild, unapproachable, even compared to other remote corners of Siberia. Mountains riddled with canyons preserve the peace of local nature.
We had to go down to the river like this, with a certain amount of risk, but nevertheless all went safely. The first significant obstacle was a river with a fast current. In the spring the ATVs would get washed away very badly and could be driven to the ice along which 10 wheels per rover goes. So we'd organize a safety net. When we got to the other side, I pulled other rovers with a rope so that they would not get nailed to the ice. Then we'd move on, either just on tundra or swamp, or riverbeds. In one place in Putoran hills there was a lake with very soft ice. And that's where we shot the footage of the all-terrain vehicle going, and the ice bends underneath it. It happens just a few days a year, and we were lucky enough to be on those days. I just drove around the lake to get these beautiful shots of the lake. That looks unreal. When an all-terrain vehicle of about 7 tons is driving on the ice breaks, and THE rover plunges into the water, floats, and rises up on the ice. There are 2 pictures here that show the rover standing still, just standing on the ice, and it's squeezed through the hole and there's water coming out. You drive off and it's like driving on flat ice with no water. It's spring and soft ice is very unusual. Unlike winter ice in the fall, spring ice, it's soft, it flexes, and even though it's very thick, it's still very poorly loaded. Sometimes the traffic was in little streams like this, fallen trees blocking our way, and we had to go to the banks to get round the obstacle. This is what the ice looks like. We were very lucky to be there at that time, because if it had been a little bit earlier, the ice would have been in our way. We got there just at the most convenient time, to pass this part of the way, to the plateau foothills. These photos show one serious problem that stopped our movement. Here, the brackets that hold the hydraulic cylinders for steering the articulated rover have been torn out. We did not have a spare hydraulic cylinder. This is how it started to look after the repair, like new. This repaired hydraulic cylinder worked properly, without oil leaks, until the end of the expedition. This is a good example of the fact that it's an interesting adventure. Anything can happen and you shouldn't be afraid of even severe damage. You have to figure out how to deal with it. Here's a picture that shows a different problem. When you're traveling along rivers, the big danger is the trees along the bank. They overhang the water and become a difficult obstacle to overcome. Under one of these trees, the second section of the all-terrain vehicle got caught, and it got caught in the current. The danger was that it could overturn the rover. In order to get out, we pulled with winches. Cantai Lake. There were no problems here as long as the ice could support the weight of our rovers, which was not long. The ice ran out and we had to continue traveling by swimming. Then we got out on the ice again. To get out of the water faster, the small all-terrain vehicles were pulled with a rope. In this section of our route we had to repeat this not once, but many times. It was because the ice was of different thickness. Some of it was thin and brittle and some of it was thick and hard. It was difficult to determine in advance where it was thin and where it was hard. The all-terrain vehicle's abilities came in handy. It was only possible to overcome this route because the all-terrain vehicles can go down to the water and back up to the ice. Meanwhile, spring is welcoming. The color of the forest is changing, from a faded gray to a light green. And it's really nice, it's really inspiring. Those who live in nature understand very well how springtime is a joy. It doesn't just feel like a picture of green, but you feel it in your soul, you feel it on the level of internal sensations. This is how simple, one could say Spartan, the second part of the 10-wheel all-terrain vehicle looks inside. There's a wood-burning stove, where you can warm water, and quickly raise the temperature inside. On the wall on the salt side there are devices for satellite communication, and all the crew members could sit at this table. A large number of trees did not allow us to go ashore, so we would moor to them for overnight stay. This was the slowest section. We walked only 500 meters during the whole daylight period. We corrected the route and crossed to the other side of the river, came to a pebble beach. We met some tourists. Where did they come from? We didn't understand. It was even more of a shock for them. They'd been driven very far from civilization, the middle of Putorana. They dropped them off on a shingle beach with boats, for the fact that they're in a completely deserted corner of Russia. They thought no one ever came here, and they'd had to have a pioneering experience. And then 4 all-terrain vehicles turn up. They were very much surprised. So, shattered their illusion of untouched places. And we started to climb up to the Putarana Plateau. No one had ever done this before us. The local snowmobilers said, "We don't go up there on snowmobiles." They said, "There are no roads there at all and it's impossible." Nevertheless, we slowly started to climb up there. In the distance, the prospects open up. First of all, there were no more trees. Next came shrubs, lichen, and then only bare rock remained. Along the way we climbed up to 1400 meters. It was the highest point. We passed on the Putarana Plateau. Of course we were not traveling on a flat plain. There were descents, ascents. The weather changed a lot. It was snowing and raining. You have to realize it's the middle of July. Down at the bottom of the foothills it's hot and dry, and here at over 1,000 meters it's cold and wet. But along with this feeling of triumph, we felt the excitement of the descent ahead of us. Fuel supplies are very limited. We had 2.5 tons of fuel on board, not a small amount, but if we made a mistake in navigation, we'd have to cover a long distance. It's very easy to come to a dead end that even our all-terrain vehicles can't overcome. And there is no certainty that the next attempt to find a place to descend will be successful. Who would deliver the fuel and how would be unknown. We have always used the opportunity to move on snow. That's the opportunity we took, because it's faster and easier to go in the snow. At these altitudes, it's dense. It's much better than rocks. Look how big the rocks are. Driving on these rocks, of course, you had to take a lot of care of the tires to get the pressure right. Tire pressure is very important, because if you go all the way round at low pressure, the wheels are going to fail. There's no such thing as miracles. When you have low pressure in a wheel, it's very deformed, and if you drive for long periods of time, creases start to form under the tread and rub holes in it. So to avoid wheel failure, we drove at a slightly higher pressure. Accordingly, we had to drive slower on such bumps.
I'm sorry, but I don't need to interrupt you to ask you a question. Is it true that you didn't have a spare wheel?
Yes. It's surprising but true. We didn't carry a single spare wheel. 4 all-terrain vehicles with a total of 22 wheels for 10,000 kilometers. From this lake, it was very difficult to find the road, because on the map the road is there, but on the ground it's not. We spent a lot of time looking for a place where we could go down from the plateau, so as not to waste fuel. We explored the area on foot, but could not find it. The derived route led us somewhere along streams, somewhere through sparse forests. And here's a picture that shows roughly what kind of landscape we were walking through. But it was not always so open and easy. Sometimes it was difficult to maneuver through the woods in order to make progress. As we descended lower down, we came across some amazing artifacts left over from the winter. At first sight, they looked like flying saucers to us. Apparently, the relatively warm water had washed something out, and then it went away and left these snowy ice blocks. Here is a photo of a rover near the snow ice blocks. Thanks to it, you will understand their size. So these are quite large ice artifacts. As a rule, ice glaciers occur in wide, shallow areas of rivers. Here's a photograph that shows the cameraman standing in the middle of the river, and it's less than ankle deep. These are the places where ice blocks form in winter. You can see that it's layered. At first, the river freezes to the bottom. From the positive temperature, water forms on the surface of the ice and goes its new channel, then it freezes again. The next time it opens up in another place, and so on and so forth. I would also like to share some useful information for those traveling by car or all-terrain vehicle. On routes far from populated areas, it may be necessary to repair parts by welding. For this purpose, you need to take wires, electrodes, and 3 batteries. Yes, 3 batteries are enough to weld metal. Without the ability to repair with welding, it is impossible to go on long expeditions. Here is a clear example, a picture of how we repaired the frame of the all-terrain vehicle, first cutting it out and then welding it back in place. This is very useful for those who are traveling. This is what a broken rover wheel looks like. The stress has cracked the metal and we didn't notice when it starts to dangle. This pipe is where the exhaust gases go to the wheels. It was lucky that it happened on a flat and hard surface and not on a downhill slope or a river with a big current. This is what the wheel looks like after the repair. We were satisfied with the work done and that we would continue on our way. It's not very pretty, but the main thing is that this repair lasted until the end of the journey. After which we lit a fire to heat the stones. When the wood was burning, we covered it with a tent to warm up, washed up, and then continued on our way. The finale of our expedition didn't take place until late autumn. Initially, we planned to finish it in a town not far from the Kuril Islands in a city called Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, but the main sponsor of the trip insisted on changing the route. As a result, the end point of our route was the city of Anadyr. The sponsors had further plans to cross the Bering Strait. We did not want to change the initial plan, but he insisted. We were forced to change the route and end our journey in Anadyr. This is how beautifully, one could say parade-like, we finished our expedition.
Если вьюга настала, ты победи ее, чтоб твоя звезда засияла, так не ведая преград, в мире, где сердца единым стучат. Знай, что цель ведет сквозь года. Станет явью мечта, как 2 крыла над там, тернистый путь на восток. Нас сплотил и крепко связал 100 дорог. Если горы и реки вдруг на пути твоем, им не стать той помехой, вместе мы все пройдем, чтоб твоя душа совершала перелет вокруг земли, чтоб твоя звезда засияла вдали. Знай, что цель ведет сквозь года. Мечта, как 2 крыла
This is the end of an interesting and amazing story. Thank you for watching. Good luck.